Every night for 4 months, the same car parked in the same spot on the 3rd level of a hospital parking garage. Every night, a security guard named Frank Delaney was one phone call away from having it towed. He never made the call. Not once. And he couldn't fully explain why, even to himself. Frank had worked the overnight shift at Ridgeview Rehabilitation Center for 11 years. Mostly walking empty hallways and checking badge readers nobody used after midnight. The parking garage was the boring part of the job, until a gray sedan started showing up every night at exactly 9:40, parking in the same corner spot and staying until sunrise. The first night, Frank walked over with his radio in hand, ready to write it up. A man was asleep behind the wheel, jacket balled up as a pillow against the window. Frank stood there for a full minute, radio still raised, and then lowered it without saying a word. He told himself he'd deal with it tomorrow. Tomorrow became a week. A week became 4 months. Every night, same spot, same car, same silence. Frank started timing his rounds so he'd pass that corner last, telling himself it was just easier that way. He never asked the man his name. The man never asked why the guard kept walking past without saying anything. Then Ridgeview brought in a new facilities director, a man named Curtis Boyle, who arrived with a clipboard and a liability policy nobody in the building had ever bothered enforcing. His first week, he circulated a memo, zero tolerance overnight parking, effective in 10 days. Any unauthorized vehicle after 11 p.m. would be towed automatically. No exceptions, no warnings. Frank read the memo twice standing in the break room. 10 days. He did the math without meaning to. 10 days until the car in the corner spot either had somewhere else to be, or got hauled away with a man still asleep inside it. Frank almost said something that first week. He walked toward the sedan on night 6 with the memo folded in his jacket pocket, close enough to knock on the window, and stopped himself. The man looked exhausted in a way sleep alone doesn't fix. Frank turned around and finished his rounds instead. If you think there are people who quietly bend rules for reasons they can't fully explain, and it usually means more than it looks like, hit like right now, because Frank was about to learn exactly what those 10 days actually meant to the man in that car. On night 8, the sedan wasn't there. Frank told himself that was that. Problem solved, the man had found somewhere else. The memo had done its job without Frank having to say a single uncomfortable word. He almost felt relief walking that empty corner spot. The car was back the next night. Same time. Same spot. Curtis Boyle caught Frank on night 9, standing near the garage entrance, going over the tow log himself. There's a vehicle here almost every night that's never once been flagged, Curtis said, tapping the clipboard. That's your job, Delaney. If I find out you've been letting this slide personally, I'm not just writing up the car owner. I'm writing you up too. Frank had one night left before the policy took effect, and now his own job was tied to whatever he decided to do about it. That night, Frank walked over and finally knocked on the window. The man startled awake. David Marsh, 44 years old, a maintenance electrician who'd worked the same county contract for 16 years. He rolled the window down, already reaching for his keys, already assuming he was being told to leave for good. I'm not here to tow you, Frank said. I need to understand what's actually going on, because tomorrow I don't have a choice anymore. David was quiet for a moment, hands still on the wheel. My wife's in room 214. Linda. Stroke. 5 months ago. Therapy starts here at 6 a.m. every morning, and some mornings she doesn't remember who I am until I've been sitting with her 20 minutes. He looked toward the building. Rent on top of gas money to drive back and forth twice a day. I couldn't make both work, so I stopped going home most nights. I figured being close mattered more than sleeping in a bed. There was one night, David said, voice dropping. She had a bad episode around 3 a.m. Nurse ran down to find me because I was 20 feet away instead of 40 minutes away. I don't know what happens if I'm not here for the next one. Frank stood there for a long moment, the memo still folded in his jacket pocket, suddenly feeling like the least important piece of paper he'd carried in 11 years. Frank didn't say much else that night. He walked back to the security office, sat down, and stared at the 10-day memo for a long time before doing something he'd never once done in 11 years on the job. He called Curtis Boyle at home past midnight and asked for 15 minutes in the morning. The next day, Frank didn't ask for an exception. He proposed something else entirely, a reserved overnight spot for immediate family of long-term patients, quietly written into policy as a hospital accommodation rather than a favor to one guard's conscience. Curtis, to Frank's genuine surprise, didn't argue. He'd lost his own father in a facility like this one, alone at 4 a.m. with no one 20 feet away. Neither man mentioned that detail out loud. Frank found out from a nurse 3 weeks later, almost by accident. David still parks in that same corner spot most nights, except now there's a small laminated sign on the space that nobody but Frank and Linda's care team fully understand the story behind. Linda's therapy is slow, but she started recognizing David most mornings before the 20-minute mark now. Frank never told David why he made that call to Curtis at midnight instead of just walking away like he had for 4 months already. He still isn't sure he's ready to explain that his own mother spent her last 6 weeks in a facility 2 counties away from him, and that he never once made it there before dawn. Maybe one night, if David ever asks why the sign appeared, Frank will tell him. Maybe some reasons are easier to act on than to say out loud. Never assume the person breaking a small rule at 3 a.m. is doing it carelessly. Sometimes the rule is the only thing standing between someone and the 20 feet that matter most. If this one got you, tell us in the comments. Should Frank tell David the real reason he made that call? Subscribe to Gentle Hearts. We'll see you in the next story.